but they're not Jesus. They're just
Right.
human.
All right, so today we're going to talk about role models and people that you follow and people that you learn from. So let me just jump right in. Who are the people you find yourself being most inspired by? I mean, professionally and personally. So we'll start. Pastor Dave.
Mm-hmm.
Pastor Dave. Why don't we start with you?
I've got so many people that as I started to think about it, that I follow, whether it be on like Instagram or read their books or whatever else. And I'd say that the guy or person that's inspiring me the most right now is a dude named Bob Goff. You ever heard of Bob Goff before? So the way that Bob just has this like real gift of just loving people, everybody and anybody. And he's written a couple books, and I picked up his first book a few years ago and just loved it, shared it with a bunch of people, and then had the opportunity to hear him speak at a church nearby where I was, and just really, really funny, inspiring. He just has a gift for sharing the love of Christ with as many people as possible. So I love that because it's sort of professional for me, but also personal. It kind of, it's a little bit of both. He's never been a pastor. He's been a lawyer most of his life, from what I understand. But now he just inspires people to love people as Jesus loves us. And so I like that. And like for professionally, that breathes life into what I do and makes me want to be better at that. And personally, he just has a really great family life. He seems to do a lot with his kids, and he's very whimsical and likes to do a lot of trips with them. So I think that's somebody that was at the top of my list.
Okay.
So I could say more, but we can go to you now.
Oh, man, that's a list. Well, personally, like, my dad, I love to be able to watch my father and just be able to ask him questions. And, that's the first guy I've ever watched just to do anything. But one role model that I follow right now, that's not into ministry, is actually Will Smith. He's hilarious on Instagram, but he also has like all these moments where it's like it's a leadership thing, it's a life growth podcast sometimes, and sometimes he's just talking. But the way that man carries himself, the way that he speaks about his family, the way that he speaks about just social things going on, and being able to take it in a way where it's like it's a joke, it's nothing's too heavy, but it also like the severity of what's happening isn't left out. So I just like the way that he's carried himself. I've always enjoyed just hearing his views on certain things, because I know I'm going to be entertained, but I'm also going to learn more knowledge. And then the little aspects of leadership and just how to be a better person is always sprinkled in there, and I really enjoy it.
Yeah. See, mine would spread out. Obvious leaders from a professional standpoint for me, and it's a different generation, is John Maxwell, Rick Warren. They were huge in my development. I'm just massive in my development. And then you get into Dan Reiland, who not as many people know about, but probably had a bigger effect on me. But then there are other people like Leonard Sweet wrote a few books inside of Christianity, and I heard him speak live a few times. And there are two people in particular, Leonard Sweet and Steve Deneff, who pastors the college church in Indiana, in Marion, Indiana. And when I hear these two guys speak, I always have to have a tablet or a notebook in front of me. I just have to, because they're going to give one 20-minute sermon, and I'm going to write out a series that could last 6 months. There's so much in it, and it somehow the way they present it fires everything about my brain up, and so I'll watch those guys. Again, they're a different generation, and I'm not as into all the podcasts and all following everybody on social media and all that. So I'm still I hate to admit this, but I'm still pretty old school on this. I'm going to buy their book, and it's going to be on my shelf, and I'm going to flip through physical pages, so a lot of that's still going to happen with me. But those are kind of the guys that I look at, and I think they're a huge help to me in the way I think. Because I'll tell you this, I don't believe you can teach someone a 3-step process to lead better, to pastor better, or to do music better. I don't think you can do that. I think what you have to do is you have to help someone change the way they think.
Yeah.
Not the way they lead, but the way they think. Because I have no idea. I can't sit here and tell you, Patrick, do these 3 things and you'll be a better leader. Because you have a different personality than me. You have a different background, you have different expectations. But if I can point you to people that can make you think better, you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
You'll figure it out in your own life. So that's what I think these guys have done for me.
Yeah, some of that value that I was referring to that I get from Bob is really his perspective, and that does help me see things differently. It makes me think differently. That's why I love, because he's different, just period. Like John Maxwell, I think, was probably a good example how different his approach was to pastoral leadership back when he was at a Skyline church. It was so leadership focused and principle based, and that was a lot different than what a lot of people had been doing. And the church grew exponentially, and then obviously now his ministry and businesses have grown and grown and grown. It's been proof positive of his approach, but that was like in a different way than Bob, but just as superlative in how much they stood out among the generation.
He was also, though, Maxwell. One of the geniuses of Bob Goff, and then what Maxwell does, they're just good at relationship. They're good at loving people, and you get that when you're around. I was in a smaller meeting with Maxwell one time, and at the end of the meeting, he walks out, throws his arms around me, and says, "If I can ever do anything for you, let me." And I asked one of his staff people, I said, "Did he mean that?"
Yeah.
Now I've never called in. I've never tried to call that in, and he wouldn't know me if he ran into me in the street.
Yeah.
But it was that sense that I assume it was greatly sincere because of so many people around him. They just cared about the people he was with at the moment. I think there's a great brilliance in that, and it is a perspective thing. So it's how you see it. So have you ever had a mentor or a role model disappoint you?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
tons of times.
Well, let's talk about that story and what that might look like.
I mean,
And how it affected you.
okay, so when I got saved, I was saved at a church that happened to be called New Life. And that
Not
church,
this
Not this one.
not this one.
Okay,
Yeah,
just
separate
need to make
than this
sure.
New Life. New Life's a popular name.
It is.
1 or 2 churches out there. But the church that I was a part of was connected to the New Life. So this was in Biddeford, Maine. It was related to New Life, Colorado.
Okay.
And at the time, New Life, Colorado was pastored by a man named Ted Haggard. And Ted had come to our church and spoke, done a conference there. I had bought a book that was actually required reading at the college that I went to that he was a contributor to. And I felt like this connection because, when a person comes and speaks at your church and you really get something out of what they say, it becomes kind of personal for you and you want to invest and you want to get the book and put it on the shelf. So Ted was one of those people that I just admired as far as, man, the guy can communicate. He's led this great organization. And I remember where I was seating that particular day. I remember I was in the worship center of the school I was attending called Christ for the Nations, and there was this announcement that came from the stage, just like, hey, everybody, this is unusual, but we really just want to gather everybody together to pray because we just got a word from a source, a connection that Ted Haggard had fallen morally. And it was this huge, huge ripple effect across the congregation and all of Christianity because of Ted's position, not just at the church, but he was also, I think, at the time, like president of the National Association of Evangelicals. And he was caught in this egregious moral affair at the time, and it was crushing for me. And it was then that there was a shift in my heart about the way that I viewed Christian leaders instantly. I had, at the time, it was partly because I was like 21 and really young and pretty new believer, but I had put those people on a pedestal, almost assuming they were kind of untouchable and that, you had to have this picture of morality. So on one hand, to me, it was really disruptive personally in the way I viewed them, and I felt hurt and betrayed. But on the other hand, it gave me a healthier perspective of how to view everybody else in leadership at that time. And it made me not treat them as celebrities, but to help view them as human beings. and it helped me make this shift where it almost took some of the pressure off for me. Not that I was planning on committing any moral affair or anything like that, but going into ministry, it was kind of daunting to be like, man, if I ever mess up, I'm done in a big way. And while that's probably still true, it gives me a little bit of pause and freedom to know that, like, yeah, people do mess up. That does happen. That is wrong still, but that at least I don't have to be something I'm not. At least I can be human and do this.
Right.
So that was a pivotal moment. I don't remember what year that was, but it would have been like
I actually remember
2007 or 6 or something like that.
I remember the event. I don't remember. I don't remember the year.
But,
What year?
I mean, well, I have a story similar to like that of Dave, but the way that it came to be was because, like I said, my father was my role model. So when he had a moral failure, that resulted into my family being divorced. That was something that pivotively broke me. And I think that's something where when it hit there for me, that's when I realized I was like, oh my gosh, like my dad is human. Like like my dad isn't Superman. My dad isn't like 10 foot. Can do all this stuff. Like he's just human. And for me, I think a lot of different emotions came in. There was some emotion of just like wow, this is earth shattering and whatnot. And I begin to just see my dad not for this ideal that I put him on or this pedestal that I put him. I just put him on as like that's my father, but he's also just a human man who makes mistakes just like I do. And through that, with us being able to find grace and us being able to find us just being able to find love for each other and for the whole family, like I was able to grow a deeper relationship with my dad because it became such a safe place to understand that as a man I will have times where I'm going to fall and I'm going to fail and like one thing that we talked about is like yeah, that really hurt to like for you to discover my humanity like that, like because I think in a sense there's there's an ideal when you put your leader on such a place where you see them as invincible. Because the moment that they're not invincible, everything just kind of shatters and it's unhealthy. But when you allow yourself to see them still as your role model, like my father is still someone who I place high, and that's who I want to be better than. Then like, but you also like can bring it back like, but they're not Jesus, they're just human. Then there's a healthiness into it because it's like okay, like these are the things that he did. And these are things that I can do to avoid those same things, so that way I don't fall like that. But you also just kind of put you just kind of like normalize.
Right.
So you normalize someone, and you can still value them, but you just don't put them above some expectation. And through that, I was able to feel comfortable making mistakes because I learned that if my role model can make a mistake, and when that, but it can still come out okay at the end, and it can still come out and still be a great person, still be a great man, still be a great father, can still be like great at his job, then like me as a person who's now walking through ministry, who's now feeling so much pressure, like okay, I don't want to have anything like that happen, like no moral failures. But like like if I make a mistake, I don't have to feel like oh my god, I let everyone down. I'm not this like you can just walk in and just alleviate the pressure. Just like I am human, and if I continue to try, and though I fall, get back up and keep on trying. I'm gonna be okay. So
I think it's interesting, and I everybody develops their view of the world through what they've been through. Your experiences stack up, and I don't remember ever idolizing anybody to that degree. People were helpful to me, and people brought me up, and that's probably because my father was absentee from the first time I can remember. And my stepdad was not emotionally engaged. And so I guess I never really had that person that I looked up to like that. And so, but when I saw people fall, I would it hurt, but I never really idolized anybody. So let me throw this question out because I do see a lot of people do that.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people lose their faith because of a Ted Haggard. I see people lose their faith because of a dad that steps out. But what boundaries do you put in place now to make sure that nobody gets to that level? in your life. Nobody becomes more than a role model, becomes more like an idol. What do you do to keep them off that pedestal, I guess, is the answer. So what are boundaries you put in place to protect against that? Because I think people could use that.
Yeah, it started when the thing happened with Ted Haggard. I mean, you got to constantly remind yourself that they are really, in so many ways, no different than you are. Right. Bottom line, and that whatever struggles you're dealing with that are normal to you, most likely that person has gone through as well, and has or could be right now, or is on their way to. You know, somebody once said, a great preacher once said, you know, if you're not going through a storm, then you probably already just came out of one. You're about to head into one, or you're in one now. And I think that's very true for people who are celebrity, who are, you know, great leaders and people at the top of their game that we see. You know, but we live. You know, that's probably the best boundary I can give. But it's hard not to still not be enamored with somebody that's done something great like that. And I don't think it's wrong to look up to somebody who is representing well an ideal that you are longing for. I think it's okay to do that, as long as you don't get to this place where, like me, I felt betrayed by that guy's failure, and I had no reason to be betrayed. I guess it was because I had this, this kinship with him, but that was more personal than it should have ever been, and that's because at that time, I had seen him in a higher light, in a greater light than I needed to.
So keep humans human in your head.
Keep humans human. Yeah.
Because they are. The old phrase is everybody puts on their pants one leg at a time. Right. You know, and it doesn't matter where you are. You can sleep in the White House or the doghouse. Yeah. You put your pants on one time, one leg at a time. You know, and so I do think it's important that we just keep our perspective of people as people. Yeah. Because they're not gods. Right. They're not demigods. Yeah. You know.
And like, you know, even with what you just said, like keep humans, like, to me, like that's the only boundary that helps you with that. Because when you see someone more than what they are, it's unfair to them, because even like it just builds this irrational like sense of just almost like devotion to like, I gotta keep the image. I gotta keep the perspective of I can do this. I'm above this. And I think even sometimes for us, men in ministry, like, or fathers, prayerfully going to be a father in a couple of years, way down the line. But like, but like it keeps you in a sense of just like in a safe place where it's like I'm not Superman, I'm not God, I'm not even close to being that, but that's okay. Yeah. Because I can make mistakes, and I don't have to worry about the minute that I do something wrong. It's just like everything goes to hell in a wastebasket. Like it's going to be fine.
I think that it matters too in leadership roles, whether that leadership is as a father or as a manager or as a pastor, whatever it might be. If you overvalue, if you over elevate another leader, you will take their opinions and their statements as gospel. And I've watched people do this. They're trying to, I mentioned Maxwell and I mentioned Rick Warren. Well, Maxwell, they both pastors in Southern California. John Maxwell at Skyline, Rick Warren at Saddleback. But I couldn't come back. I did realize, God helped me, I couldn't come back and build Skyline or build Saddleback in Southern Maryland. Yeah. You can't do that. But I've seen guys try that. I've seen gals try that. And it doesn't work. That's an overvaluing of that opinion. What you've got is somebody that's been effective, and yes, they're a good role model, but you got to take what works and use it, and you got to let the other stuff go.
Yeah, there's something connected to this too that occurred to me when you were talking a minute ago about the boundary of recognizing that they're human. There's also another piece that might really help, and that's really recognizing and being comfortable with who you are. Ultimately, right? Because it's easy to be jealous. It's easy to look at accolades and things that people accomplish and be like, okay, if they can do it, I can do it. And then suddenly you're looking at that thing that they've done, and you've almost assumed that because it's possible for them, it's possible for me. Right. And that might be true, and it's fine to like hope for that to a degree, but sometimes that can creep over to jealousy and sometimes envy or whatever else, and that's what's crushing when if and when they fail, if that happens suddenly. If you had too much hope in the things that they did, trying to copy them or emulate them or become like them,
You start believing
then that dream dies with them, and it can crush you to the point where you're like, who even am I? Your
Right.
identity is wrapped up in trying to do the things that they
Don't
did.
ever let your identity get wrapped up in anybody but Christ. It's because other humans are humans. So, to roll this thing all together, let's see if I can do this.
Let's go.
You need solid, effective role models,
Yes.
Yep.
but you must always keep humans human.
Yeah.
Therefore, you are following people who are effective, but you are not allowing yourselves to be crushed by their humanity when it shows up.
That's good.
That's good.
I think that's a good place to leave it.
It's a good word right there.